The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Lunch and Learn in our ongoing Financial Friday series. Sainies is excited to offer these sessions in cooperation with our corporate partner, AXA. AXA has a long-standing presence in New York, and a large portion of AXA's New York client base is built upon the work they do within the public education system. Through AXA, Sainies members can receive competitive insurance rates and a full array of retirement services, including a complimentary financial profile for Sainies members, which we urge you to take advantage of. This is a great benefit. Our AXA presenter today is Nick Aguglia, a Vice President for AXA's Retirement Benefits Group. Before we get started, please note that participants are muted during the session, but we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. If you have a question, just type that in the question area of your control panel, and we'll get to those in the last few minutes. We're also recording this session, and we'll send all registrants a recording, and it will be posted at sainies.org. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Nick.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you everybody for attending. Again, my name is Nick Aguglia, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the presentation today. Today, what I'm going to do is we're going to introduce you to an extremely important estate planning document that we call the Family Love Letter. And the name doesn't sound very legal, and that's because it's not actually a legal document. It's more of a concept. And the concept of the Family Love Letter was developed by John Scrogan, an attorney who practices out in the Atlanta area, and was co-authored by Donna Pagano, who's a certified financial planner. One of John's specialties was estate planning, and over the years he witnessed a lot of confusion that had caused failure in a lot of estate plans to be executed properly. So briefly, the Family Love Letter is just a compilation of all of the information that one's family might need at the time of death to ensure that their wishes are fulfilled. So advancing here, just a real quick disclosure. So the presentation is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for tax or legal purposes. Please consult with the tax or legal advisors regarding your particular circumstances. The Family Love Letter is also a federally registered trademark of FIT Incorporated. AXA Equitable Life Insurance Company and its affiliates make no representation or guarantee as to the accuracy or correctness or timeliness of the contents contained in any of the websites mentioned in the brochures. And John Scrogan and Donna Pagano are not affiliated with AXA Equitable or AXA Advisors in any way. So diving right into things, on the agenda today, the first thing that I want to do is put the Family Love Letter into context by talking briefly about the purpose of estate planning and really what makes it so important. Next, I want to go over what should be included and how it can be used. And finally, the last part of the presentation, we'll talk more about the Family Love Letter and what to do with it once it is complete. So there's a lot of misconceptions that float around regarding estate planning. One of those is that just for rich or wealthy people, that not everybody needs to do estate planning. Sometimes people feel that it's only for older or elderly people. Other times there's a misconception that it only deals with death and taxes. All three of these are common misconceptions. One of the things that we find is many people don't even have a basic will, and a lot of it is because of these misconceptions. So first, again, estate planning is not just for the rich. It is really for everybody. Second, estate planning is not just for older people. Unfortunately and tragically, we probably all know people who've unfortunately left us too soon, and some of them perhaps without any plan in place or even a will. With that being said, when you're developing an estate plan, it's really important to get away from that third misconception as well, which is just thinking exclusively about death and taxes. Because if you just focus on those things, you're really going to be diverted from what should be the real focus. And that's the living, the people that we leave behind. So the loved ones who live on, what is our legacy going to be to them? We should really focus on protecting our family and their lives going forward. So estate planning is basically for everyone of all ages. Of course, the more assets somebody has, the more complex or complicated their estate plan may become, but everyone should have some sort of plan. So there's really two principal elements of estate planning. The first is going to be to execute documents that provide for health and or incapacity. The second is going to be to provide information relating to your assets, liabilities, and wishes. So taking them in reverse order, you should provide all relevant information concerning your assets and liabilities and your wishes in the event of your death or incapacity. And second, you have to draw up those legal documents that ensure that your property is passed on or managed and family members are protected according to your wishes. Time and careful thought really needs to be devoted to your estate plan. Remember, your loved ones have to live with the result of your plan or failure to plan. Estate planning is one of those matters that we really don't have a choice in. It's going to be an issue. Either we can proactively and consciously make decisions about how we want things to play out, or we can rely on the courts or on family members to try to figure it out and be left with the burden. That brings me to the subject on the next slide, which is going through really the results of failing to plan. And I could sit here and fill up a whole half-hour presentation with just horror stories that I've seen or that I've witnessed. And I'm sure that there's many, many more that any advisor or any attorney could also bring to light. So without proper documents in place, a family can really be left in confusion upon one's death. And that's really just a short-term consequence. Without a clearly spelled out and most importantly, legally binding declaration from you, it really sets the stage for conflict. Any existing family controversies that may have already been in place are only going to be exaggerated, and you're going to see a battle play out over your legacy. Not to mention, new disputes are almost always going to arise afterwards as well. So if you die without a will, for example, your estate can be tied up for a prolonged period of time. I've heard of many situations where estates have been tied up, in some cases for many, many years. And the amount of legal and administrative fees that are associated with that can be extremely high. And usually in the end, nobody ends up winning, especially the individuals who are expecting or who thought they were going to be maybe benefiting from or going to be helping to fulfill your wishes. So the family love letter is really just, it's a concept. It is a compilation or a collection of all of the information that your family is going to need at the time of your death, or if you should become incapacitated due to an illness or an injury. So now that we've touched a little bit upon really the relevance of estate planning, and we hopefully recognize the prominent role that it plays in one's future, let's dive a little bit deeper in discussing what the family love letter is. And again, I do want to stress that the family love letter is more so a concept, not a legal document. So providing information at a time of confusion is really the main purpose of what the family love letter will provide. So simply put, it's going to just alleviate a lot of confusion and a lot of concern that loved ones will be faced with. A well-developed estate plan can really help loved ones just have a much, much easier time dealing with a very traumatic situation. If you don't have a plan set up in place, your loved ones are going to be dealt with a lot of not only financial and additional emotional trauma on top of what they're already going through. And last, a grieving family, the last thing that they're going to want to deal with is really having to identify, locate different policies, figure out where different things are located, try to figure out somebody's wishes. So information for the family love letter, we try to make it simple and break it down into really 4 key areas. The 4 main areas that we try to look at are going to be your advisors and your financial information, your insurance and benefits, documents and other information, and then a family history and an ethical will. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into all of those. But I would say the word inventory is really a good way to describe what the family love letter is. It's really just a collection, again, or an inventory of everything that we have going on. And remember, the more thorough that somebody is with their estate plan or while coming up with this family love letter, the easier that things are going to be for your loved ones later on. Now, the first section is going to cover advisors or financial information. So depending on how extensive somebody's financial investments are, this can encompass quite a bit of material. Looking at things like who are your attorneys, who are your financial advisors, insurance agents or brokers, dealing with different investment strategies, lesser things that people don't think about as much, but maybe things like frequent flyer miles or rewards points on credit cards. Most credit cards or any type of promotional cards like this, they have usually within the policies or the promotional handbook, they'll give you the rules for what happens in the event of somebody's passing. What happens with this money, what happens with these rewards, so on and so forth. What about liabilities, different loans, financial obligations? Who's responsible for them if somebody becomes incapacitated or passes away? Credit card information, so different types of credit cards, the numbers, the statements, any online access. How do we get information accessible to us? So all of this information would make up the first section of the family love letter. Second section, we're looking at things like your insurance and benefits. So every type of insurance somebody carries, all the policies, all the information about the coverage, the premiums, how the premiums are paid, if they're set up to be automatically deducted from somebody's bank account, all of this information is extremely important. I've come across more than one time where an individual had a life insurance policy and ended up being diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's and didn't tell their significant other about the policy, or the significant other forgot about it. And what ended up happening is somebody just went years and years without making any payments, later to find out that then the insurance was no longer in place for them, all because of just the lack of communication and the lack of having some sort of written plan in place or written understanding about somebody's overall situation. So the third section covers documents and other information. These are going to be a little bit more of the legal documents. So your estate planning documents, such as a will, maybe a property list, a living will, powers of attorney. Your trust documents, so your different insurances if somebody has a trust in place or if there's a need for a trust. Do we have an individual, maybe that's a minor in the household or somebody that we still need to care for? Do we care about charitable gifting? All of these things can be included within the trust documents, and all of these things should be included within the estate planning and family love letter process. Also, personal and family information, birth certificates, citizenship, military discharges, marriage license, divorce decrees, and adoption. A lot of times when we're dealing with somebody's passing, a lot of these documents end up needing to be provided for various reasons. Either name changes weren't done properly in the past or addresses that weren't on file. So all of this personal and family information, having copies of it or having access to it or making sure that you provide it to whomever will be handling your situation, it's going to make things a lot easier for them. And a lot of times when we think about estate planning, we think about just the basics. We just think about a will. And maybe we take it a step further and think about one or two other legal documents, but we don't always pay attention to some of the smaller details, which are going to be as important when it comes to figuring out the whole estate planning process for people. If you serve as a guardian or a trustee, all of those papers will need to be ensured that the proper transition of those responsibilities. So there's a lot more that is involved when it comes to the documents and the information being provided, and all of this should be disclosed or listed somewhere for people. Now let's talk a little bit more about the estate planning documents specifically. So part of your estate planning documents, you have a will, as we talked about a little bit already, a personal property disposal list, a living will, medical power of attorney, and durable general power of attorney are some of the more common ones. So 4 of these are going to be legal documents. The will, the living will, the medical and general powers of attorneys, those are all the legal documents. The personal property disposal list, it's just something that you might want to think about putting together to accompany your will. And simply put, one is about what you've earned, the other is about what you've learned. So now let's dive into the individual documents and go through a little bit more about those. So the will specifically, again, the will probably being the most common, most well-known legal document when it comes to estate planning. Your will is just, it's a final declaration of how your assets and your family should be treated after your death. So everyone's circumstances are going to be very different. There's no one-size-fits-all will. And if you try to get something done that's just general, the results may not be what you intended, and it may cause serious problems to your heirs. You spell out the disposition of your assets, you choose people to make your decisions, you choose an executor, trustees, if it's applicable. One of the more important points with wills is that they're not good for all time. Very frequently, we'll talk with people who had a will done 30 years ago and think that it's good and that it's going to still honor their wishes today. So really, wills are supposed to be updated periodically throughout somebody's life as their circumstances change. So maybe it's naming grandchildren, or maybe naming great-grandchildren, or nieces and nephews, or just changing around our wishes as our life changes and as our life evolves. So one final point is with traditional families, even when somebody passes away, there may not be a question about who inherits what. However, if you have situations where there's a domestic partner, the will is going to be extremely important. And if the will is not set up, our partner may not be entitled to what we think they are, depending on state rules. And we may find out that, unfortunately, our wishes are also not being fulfilled. So personal property disposal list. So what this is going to do, it's going to direct how your personal property should pass. Now, many professionals involved in estate planning can tell horror stories, myself included, about sometimes maybe wretched wrangling that can result over family heirlooms or other personal property. Things being stolen, things being misplaced, things that just we thought were there that aren't there. So it's very important to make sure that if there are family heirlooms or if there are personal property, tangible possessions that somebody wants passed on, that a list is made up to ensure that those go to the appropriate parties. Now, as I alluded to previously, a personal property disposal list is not a legal document. However, what we recommend is making up a detailed list and giving it some thought. And if you want a particular child, maybe one of your siblings or one of their children or a friend to receive a particular item, write it down, document it. Go a step further, include pictures so that there's no doubt what item you're referring to. Such a list can be referenced in your will and can be honored like other requests. So a legal advisor or attorney can help explain the rules applying to each individual state. So as I mentioned, it is not a legal document, but it can be included as part of your will. It can be referenced in the will, and it can serve many of the same purposes for tangible properties. The next legal document is a living will. And a living will is a very important document, and I think one thing that people don't have set up as frequently as they should. So the Supreme Court ruled that in order to be taken off of life support, a person must have declared his or her desire before becoming incapacitated. So this is not just a concern for older people. There have been many cases throughout the decades that have been very public, one down in Florida, a couple other across the country, in which families have fought amongst themselves with the state of somebody and regarding end-of-life matters. So instead of leaving these decisions up for an emotional child or leaving them up to the courts or the state to make a decision of, or leaving up to healthcare professionals, having something in place, having this legal will, this living will, this legal document in place ahead of time to make sure that your requests regarding your life are honored is extremely important. And it's also going to take some of the burden off of those that are left behind having to make that decision on your behalf. Switching gears to a medical power of attorney. So a medical power of attorney is just another name for a healthcare proxy. I think most people more commonly call it a healthcare proxy. But with a healthcare proxy or a medical power of attorney, what you're doing is you're choosing the person that you want to speak for you if you cannot speak for yourself regarding a whole range of medical treatment. So this document is especially important, again, with domestic partners, because without a medical power of attorney, it's possible that your partner might not even be allowed to visit in the hospital. The right to make medical decisions for you would likely go to a parent or go to a sibling. Durable general power of attorney. This is another very important one. It's one that I've dealt with personally with in-laws. In many families, a spouse would automatically assume this responsibility. However, depending on the complexity of your finances, among other things, your spouse might not be the best person suited for this role. So here again, this document is especially important for domestic partners. So without a power of attorney, your partner may not have any legal standing with regards to your financial affairs. You should consult with a legal advisor regarding your particular situation. So the durable general power of attorney pretty much grants a person of your choice the power to manage your assets in the event that you're incapacitated due to an illness or an injury. Has anybody ever tried calling maybe your cable provider or your electric provider, but your name's not on the bill? They won't tell you anything. So if we're looking at minor matters such as a utility bill, just imagine, for those of you that maybe haven't gone through it, and I'm sure a lot of people have already, just trying to get information about somebody's banking account information, or trying to get information on how to pay somebody's credit card, or how to pay a medical bill for somebody. Without having a general power of attorney, it becomes very challenging and difficult to help anybody with their financial matters. Just some more general information. So after preparing your estate plan and your trust documents, you really need to fill in and think about some additional general information. Things like safes and safe deposit boxes. Do we have them? If so, where are the keys kept? What are the combinations? How do we get access to them? Maybe passwords for computers or for email or for internet accounts. Social security numbers, or better yet, maybe a copy of a social security card. Driver's license information, or again, a copy of the driver's license. Same thing with your passport. Medicare information, maybe religious and other affiliations. So again, all of this just becomes things that a lot of times people don't think about on a regular basis. But when you're making a conscious decision to sit down and to come up with a plan, these are the things that we encourage people to take your plan to the next level. Because again, any advisor, any attorney who deals with estates is going to be able to tell you horror stories about even minor things that weren't prepared properly that all of a sudden snowballed into much, much bigger issues. So family history and an ethical will. So the final section covers family history and an ethical will. Just as a regular will is a vehicle for passing on your material possessions, an ethical will is a way to pass on your philosophical possessions, maybe your values, maybe your ideas about what's important in life, your wishes for the future. As it says in the slide, this is about the intangibles, or maybe what's in your heart and not what's in your bank account. One of the things that me personally, as I go throughout my life, I've become very interested in my family's history. And I'm fortunate enough to have been alive and known many of my grandparents and even some of my great-grandparents. So during that time, there's been a lot of information, a lot of family history that has been shared with me. And one of my goals is to make sure that I continue to pass that information on to my kids and eventually to my grandkids and hopefully on and on. So having some sort and putting some thought into this family history or an ethical will, again, is just something that from the heart you can pass on. It's more of a legacy of values that can continue on after we're no longer here. So after completion, so once we've done everything that we've talked about already, once we've sat down, once we've given everything some thought, once we've sat down with an attorney or a legal advisor and come up with the legal documents, once we have this family love letter concept, this whole plan in place, what do we do at that point? So I'd say at that point in time, it's going to be important to make sure that a spouse or an adult child, maybe an attorney or even a financial advisor, has copies of everything. One of the things that, again, we also see very frequently is meeting with somebody who, says, oh, I know my mom has a will, but we can't find it. Or I know dad had some gold bars in the house, but nobody knows where they are. Or I know there was money that grandpa used to keep in the behind mattresses or under mattresses behind picture frames, but nobody can find it. So making sure that once we create this plan, people need to know about it. And sometimes it can be a little bit of a hard conversation to have with parents. Other times it's a hard conversation to have with your kids. So one of the ideas or one of the things that we would encourage is for people to have a family meeting to discuss this. And again, it's a tough concept, it's a tough conversation to have, but it is much, much easier to have the conversation in advance than having to have the conversation afterwards, trying to figure everything out and to deal with the ramifications of a ill-executed or an improper plan. So in conclusion, the creation of the family love letter can really be a key to the smooth execution of your estate plan. Everything is listed, everything is accessible, there's no hunting, there's no chaos. But there's also values that can be derived from it now. It's not something that people should really put off. And you may discover that your paperwork, maybe it's incomplete, and you really have to do some research to kind of finish some of the projects now. This could save you a lot of problems, not only during your lifetime, but afterwards. And more importantly, when you look at all your investments and your policies and all of their values, maybe the current coverage, current values, and so forth, it really may become clear at that point in time that your policy amounts aren't enough. Maybe they should be increased. That you should maybe set up contributions to a retirement account or start saving more into a retirement account. Or maybe that you should be consolidating some of the old accounts that you have out there into something like an individual retirement account. Maybe your beneficiaries haven't been updated. Maybe we have a beneficiary that's somebody that's no longer with us, or maybe we have a beneficiary that is a ex-spouse. So there's a variety of other adjustments that should be addressed and could be dealt with now as opposed to after. Families are connected over time by legacies of both financial assets and family values. They really pass on from one generation to the next. Creating this family love letter can be a way to encourage openness about a whole range of matters that affect your generation and for the generations to follow. So thank you for listening to the presentation. And Michelle, I'll turn it back to you. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the question panel right now. Susan, type in there if you have a quick question. If not, as I mentioned, the session has been recorded and a copy will be sent to all registrants. And maybe, Nick, you want to throw out your contact information, but that information is also available on saneys.org, and I'll send that link along as well, whether you want to contact Nick or your regional AXA advisor. Oh, we do have one question. One sec. How do we access on the Saneys website? I will send everyone here an email with those direct links, and you'll be able to access this presentation as well as all past presentations. So that'd be easy to do. Anything else? All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Nick, and have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.